My brother looked me dead in the eye, surrounded by his wealthy in-laws, and called me a cheap embarrassment. He laughed, telling me that my low-class presence was going to ruin his perfect $1 million wedding day. He even threatened to have security throw me out if I didn't hide in the back. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just quietly smiled, took a sip of my champagne, and watched him toast to a luxury lifestyle that he thought he had secured forever. What my arrogant brother didn't realize was that the entire venue, the high-end catering, the leased sports cars, and even the massive trust fund he was bragging about didn't belong to him. They belonged to me. By the time the sun came up the next morning, his perfect life was entirely gone, and he was begging me for mercy on his knees. My name is Rosalind. For as long as I can remember, my older brother Vance was the center of our family's universe. He was the golden child, a man who believed he was destined for a life of absolute luxury, even if he hadn't earned a single penny of it himself. While I spent my 20s working 16-hour days, quietly building my own corporate security firm and investing every spare dollar into real estate, Vance was busy curating an image. He wore tailored suits he couldn't afford, frequented high-end clubs, and looked down on anyone who didn't drive a luxury sports car. To Vance, I was just his boring, unpretentious younger sister. Because I chose to drive a reliable sedan and preferred comfortable linen clothes over flashy designer labels, he genuinely believed I was struggling. I never corrected him. My financial success was my own business, and I valued privacy over praise. But everything escalated dramatically when Vance met Corinne. Corinne came from an old money family in Aspen, and she was just as obsessed with status as he was. The moment they got engaged, Vance's arrogance reached a pathological level. He didn't just want a wedding. He wanted a multi-million-dollar spectacle to prove to Corinne's snobbish family that he belonged in their elite social circle. Suddenly, my modest lifestyle wasn't just a personal choice anymore. To Vance, my unpretentious presence was a threat to his carefully fabricated illusion of supreme wealth, and he was determined to put me in my place. The rehearsal dinner was held at an exclusive rooftop restaurant overlooking the city, a venue that practically screamed opulence. As I walked in wearing a simple, elegant navy dress, Corinne immediately eyed me with blatant disapproval. Within minutes, Vance cornered me near the balcony, away from the glittering crowd of high society guests. His face was twisted in a mixture of embarrassment and disgust as he looked at my outfit, then glanced down at the valet parking where my practical sedan sat parked between a row of exotic sports cars. "Did you honestly think that dress was appropriate for tonight, Rosalind?" he hissed, his voice dripping with condescension. "You look completely out of place. You're a cheap embarrassment, and your low-class presence is going to ruin our wedding aesthetic tomorrow." He flatly demanded that I stay out of the official professional photographs and seat myself at the very back of the venue, claiming I would make his side of the family look impoverished in front of Corinne's wealthy parents. As he ranted about maintaining his high status, I accidentally overheard a hushed conversation between Corinne's father and Vance's wedding planner. That was the exact moment I discovered the massive lie my brother had spun. Vance had falsely told his new in-laws that he was the sole, undisputed heir to our late grandfather's massive commercial real estate and tech portfolio to secure their blessing. He was using a fake inheritance to buy his way into their elite world. I left the rehearsal dinner early, my brother's cruel words still echoing in my ears. But I wasn't crying. Instead, a cold, sharp feeling of absolute clarity took over. I drove straight to my corporate headquarters, walked into my dark office, and unlocked the biometric safe hidden behind the main bookshelf. Inside lay the true financial foundation of our family. Documents Vance had never bothered to understand because he was too busy playing the part of a wealthy playboy. The truth was a masterpiece of poetic justice. Our late grandfather had built a massive commercial empire, but he was no fool. He had watched Vance spend his youth burning through allowances, racking up credit card debt, and treating people like garbage. 6 months before he passed away, grandfather quietly altered his entire estate plan. He left the entire family conglomerate, the real estate holding companies, and the multi-million-dollar tech portfolio exclusively to me. Vance was completely bypassed. He was only granted a highly restrictive, conditional monthly allowance managed by a strict corporate trustee, an allowance meant for basic living expenses, not high society pageantry. But as I flipped through the recent corporate bank audits on my desk, my blood turned to ice. Vance hadn't just been reckless. He had gone completely rogue. Desperate to fund this million-dollar wedding and impress Corinne's family, he had bypassed the trustee entirely. He had submitted unauthorized applications, opened lines of credit, and signed legal agreements by falsely using our family conglomerate's corporate name as financial collateral. He had built his entire dream wedding on a foundation of massive corporate fraud. I sat at my desk for an hour, methodically printing out the fraudulent loan applications and credit lines Vance had opened. He had completely crossed the line. Not only had he stolen from the company, but he had also forged my legal signature on 3 separate high-end vehicle leases and the master contract for the elite resort venue itself. He genuinely believed that once he married into Corinne's wealthy family, he could quietly siphon their money to cover his tracks before I ever noticed. He thought I was too oblivious to catch on. I checked my watch. It was just past midnight. I didn't hesitate. I pulled out my phone and placed an urgent call to my chief legal counsel and our head of corporate forensic accounting. As the phone rang, I looked out the window at the quiet city skyline, feeling no guilt for what I was about to do. When my attorney answered, his voice thick with sleep, I gave him clear, uncompromising instructions. Freeze every single corporate account associated with the Whitaker Group immediately, I commanded. Flag the unauthorized lines of credit as active fraud, revoke the vehicle lease permissions, and send an immediate formal cease and desist to the wedding venue's corporate management. My legal team worked through the night, executing the orders with clinical precision. By 3 a.m., every unauthorized credit card in Vance's possession was permanently blacklisted, and the legal notices were officially delivered. My brother wanted a spectacular show, and I was about to give him one. The next morning, the sun rose over a flawless blue sky, but inside the elite resort venue, a financial storm was already making landfall. At exactly 8 a.m., just 4 hours before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, chaos struck. The first blow landed in the hotel parking lot, where a flatbed tow truck arrived to repossess the 3 luxury sports cars Vance had leased for his groomsmen. The rental coordinator coldly informed a panicked Vance that the corporate authorization had been flagged as fraudulent and revoked. Before my brother could even process the humiliation of his cars being towed away in front of his friends, his wedding planner came running down the corridor, her face completely pale. The high-end catering staff was refusing to lay out the expensive caviar and champagne breakfast stations. The corporate card Vance had provided to cover the remaining balance had been permanently blacklisted, and the payment was declined. Vance frantically tried to use his personal cards, but they were immediately rejected due to his massive overdrafts. The final, crushing blow came when the resort's general manager walked into the bridal suite. He informed a hysterical Corinne and a sweaty, trembling Vance that because the master contract had been signed using unauthorized corporate collateral, the entire event space booking was cancelled. The flowers were half arranged, the music was ready, but the venue doors were being locked. His million-dollar dream was collapsing in real time. A frantic Vance and a hysterical Corinne stormed into my hotel suite, flanked by her wealthy, furious parents. Vance's face was purple with rage as he pointed a trembling finger at me, screaming that I had used my low-class jealousy to sabotage his perfect day. Corinne was sobbing loudly, accusing me of ruining her life. I didn't flinch. I calmly stood up from the armchair, picked up a thick manila folder from the desk, and tossed it onto the coffee table right in front of Corinne's father. "I didn't sabotage your wedding, Vance," I said, my voice cutting through the screaming. "I simply stopped you from using my money to pay for it." Corinne's father frowned, opening the folder to find the certified copies of our grandfather's real will, alongside the forensic bank audits. I looked directly at the in-laws and dropped the ultimate bombshell. I explained that Vance didn't own a single asset, that he was bypassed entirely for his reckless behavior, and that I owned the entire family conglomerate. Furthermore, I showed them the legal documentation proving Vance had forged my signature to secure the venue and vehicles, meaning he was now facing immediate termination and severe criminal charges for corporate fraud. The room went dead silent. Corinne's parents stared at the paperwork in absolute horror, realizing that the wealthy elite heir they thought their daughter was marrying was actually a completely broke fraud who was likely heading to prison. The wedding was called off right then and there. Corinne's parents packed their bags, grabbed their weeping daughter, and left the resort in utter disgust, refusing to be tied to a criminal. Left entirely alone in the empty venue, Vance fell to his knees, begging me to withdraw the legal charges and restore his monthly allowance. But the time for mercy had long passed. I refused to bail him out. He had to face the reality of his actions. Today, Vance is drowning in personal debt, stripped of his title, and working a grueling entry-level job just to pay off his legal fees. His glamorous lifestyle vanished in a single morning, all because his arrogance blinded him to the truth. He thought he could step on me to climb to the top, but his own greed completely destroyed him. Now, I'm curious about those of you listening to my story. What would you have done if your own sibling publicly humiliated you and committed fraud in your name? Would you have stopped the wedding, or would you have handled it differently?